Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Bugay. Let's start with the latest developments. Only decisive steps, including from the United States of America, can compel the Kremlin to remove its troops from the Ukrainian Donbas. Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov said this in an interview with the Ukrainian service of the Voice of America. According to him, both Ukrainian and American intelligence data confirmed the accumulation of Russian troops near the borders of Ukraine. However, the defense minister does not believe that Putin is likely to decide to go on a big offensive.
Ми не панічно сприймаємо, тому що ми за 8 років цієї війни
For 8 years of war, we have become accustomed to this threat. That is, our US partners saw the previous developments, and they believe that there are more risks of threats, and I absolutely agree with them because there are signs of escalation. Our armed forces are at a high level, especially the ground forces. Recently, I had the honor to spend 4 days in the Joint Forces Operation Zone with General Zaluzhny, our commander-in-chief, to communicate with commanders and soldiers. The mood there is absolutely inspiring. Soldiers are self-confident, and they know how to defend the country.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned European allies about the likelihood of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Visiting Senegal, he also called for new anti-Russian sanctions to be prepared in view of the situation. Ukrainian military proved the diplomat's words. According to head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirill Budanov, Russia is ready for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in January-February next year, having deployed 90,000 of its troops along the northern and eastern borders of Ukraine, in the occupied Crimea, and in the territories of Donbas uncontrolled by Kyiv. Antony Blinken noted that Russia is very likely to organize new provocations on its border with Ukraine.
We have real concerns about some of the rhetoric we're seeing and hearing from Russia, as well as in social media. We don't know what President Putin's intentions are, but we do know what's happened in the past. We do know the playbook of trying to cite some illusory provocation from Ukraine or any other country, and then using that as an excuse to do what Russia is planning to do all along. And so, as a result of what we've seen, as a result of that history, we've been in very close consultation with partners throughout Europe.
Russia is trying to weaken Ukraine using various methods. This was stated by Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba in an interview with one of the Ukrainian TV channels. According to him, this is both destabilization within Ukraine and attempts to block our cooperation with other states in the defense sphere. Kuleba stressed that a new offensive operation against our country is under consideration of the leadership of the Russian Federation and personally Vladimir Putin.
Putin's readiness to engage a military option is likely to depend on several factors: strength, peace, and endurance of Ukraine, and coordination and strength of our partners' actions. We are working on both factors, and I ask not to panic but be attentive and do not react to any provocations, especially in the information space. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Vaccination at the checkpoints, transfer of the entry-exit checkpoint to the balance of the state enterprise, and assistance to people when crossing the administrative border with Crimea occupied by Russia. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories, Vereshchuk pays a walking trip to Kherson region. She has already visited the Konchak checkpoint and the Administrative Services Center walking there. In addition, the minister will inspect the dam of the North Crimean Canal, which is 90% completed. In the meantime, Vereshchuk said that no one is talking about supplying water to the occupied Crimea. This is prohibited by law. This is prohibited by all possible regulations. It is impossible. We're only talking about the fact that if the state funds were invested and they were invested 90% of the dam are already built, then we should complete it, and those services that should maintain such dams should do it effectively. But in no case is it about supplying water to Crimea. It's impossible, as I've said before. New accusations of failure to detain the Wagner private military contractor servicemen in Belarus as a large-scale special operation to destabilize the situation inside and outside Ukraine. This was stated by Ukraine's head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense. The material published by the Bellingcat investigation team also does not indicate those responsible for disrupting the operation to detain the mercenaries, but the whole world became aware of the titanic work of the Ukrainian intelligence officers who planned it. More details in our following report.
A large-scale special operation to identify and detain Russian mercenaries who took part in the hostilities in Donbas on the side of illegal armed groups started back between 2018 and 2019. Such data was obtained by the Bellingcat investigation team. According to their report, at the first stage, Ukrainian intelligence officers managed to find information about hundreds of mercenaries and then elaborated a plan to recruit several of them through a shell private military contractor.
By early 2020, it had morphed into an opportunistic sting operation targeting hundreds of former mercenaries idling away during the COVID-19 lockdown in their hometowns and villages across Russia. This final operational scenario was, according to three former security officers who spoke to Bellingcat, presented to and approved by Ukraine's political leadership in early July 2020. It included the capture and detention of 33 mercenaries by staging the emergency landing on Ukrainian soil of an aircraft carrying the targets to their fictitious deployment destination. Report of the Bellingcat investigation team.
The investigation showed that during the so-called employment of the mercenaries, the Ukrainian special services forced them to submit a CV with information about their combat experience. So they got evidence, including photos and videos of their crimes in Donbas. Minsk, the capital of Belarus, became the starting point for sending mercenaries. On July 25, 2020, they were brought to Belarus and were to be put on a plane the next day. But the departure was postponed, and on July 29th, the militants who were waiting at the hotel near Minsk were detained by the Belarusian security forces. Later, Alexander Lukashenko handed them over to Russia. The operation failed. Vasyl Burba, who was then in charge of the military intelligence of Ukraine, says that he received the order to postpone the last phase from head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak. He told about this on the air of one of Ukrainian talk shows on November the 19th.
We did not have a written order. We had a person delegated by the president. We received an order from him, an order from the president of Ukraine. Vasyl Burba, head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine in 2016-2020, on the air of Savik Shuster's Freedom of Speech talk show on November 19.
At the same time, former and current security officials say the head of intelligence is not subordinate to the head of the president's office by law.
Only President of Ukraine provides orders for such complex operations. The head of military intelligence cannot carry out any until he has received specific and direct instructions from the President of Ukraine.
The information that the Wagner's group servicemen captured in Minsk were connected with the Ukrainian special operation was made public by journalists at the end of August. The media and opposition politicians have stated that it was the president's office that was to blame for the disruption of the operation. Allegedly, information leaked from there.
We want to hear the answers to the questions. What happened? Why did they postpone it? What happened in those days between the operation was postponed and how the Wagner's mercenaries were arrested by the KGB of Belarus? Why did Zelensky then call Lukashenko? What did he want from him? Whether he called before? That is, there are many questions and we, unfortunately, do not hear the answers.
However, the Bellingcat did not find an answer to the question of the reasons for the failure of the operation. It is also highly likely that the Belarusian security forces did not initially know whom they detained. Therefore, there might be no data drain. Members of the Temporary Investigative Commission, which was created in the Ukrainian parliament, did not find any confirmation of the involvement of the office of the president in the disruption of the operation either.
Based on the intelligence data, not a single document, either by investigation or intelligence officers, confirms that the leak was from the Ukrainian side. That is, there is no such fact. Moreover, there are no documents that could prove that president giving any orders on the matter.
At the same time, former head of the Foreign Intelligence Service Mykola Malumush says, in Ukraine dozens of special operations were carried out, both successful and unsuccessful, and the results of most of them were not publicly reported. As for the Wagner operation, it was risky, and its failure could have happened due to the many miscalculations during its organization.
Taking risks with an airplane is a very multifaceted, problematic situation. It happened in Minsk itself because there was destabilization. The Russian special services could have controlled the situation at the final stage. This had to be considered as well.
Now, the reasons that led to failure of the operation are being investigated by the State Bureau of Investigation. They also check the sources of leakage of documents on the activities of the special services. Reported by Vadim Kromer and Yulia Krychkova, UATV News.
Ukraine has returned 14 its citizens from Syria for almost 3 years. They were in the closed-type camp Al-Hol in the northeast of the country. This is the fourth evacuation of Ukrainians from Syria, and it became possible due to coordinated work of the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and other departments. The returning families will be assisted in restoration of documents, as well as provided with housing. The women will be assisted in finding work, while the state will have them bring their children to schools. However, there are Ukrainians who are still held in Syria, and despite the difficulties, Ukraine will try to do everything possible to bring back those who inform about themselves and their will to return.
The most important problem is that we do not have diplomatic relations with Syria, so we work there without protection. Those territories where the camps are located are not under the control of the Syrian authorities. They are governed by some local self-government, self-proclaimed local government, unrecognized by anyone. Therefore, it is impossible to reach them through official or diplomatic lines.
We really hope that Ukraine will bring back those girls who stayed there and who are really expecting to be taken away from there. We want them to come to Ukraine in so many years. We want them to feel the joy we felt. Less than 7,500 coronavirus infections in Ukraine over the past day. The virus was found in 579 children. 326 people died from complications. Most of all new cases are reported in Dnipropetrovsk and Mykolaiv regions. Meanwhile, Luhansk and Lviv regions are leaving the red quarantine zone. According to Minister of Health of Ukraine, the rates of the spread of the disease have stabilized there.
For the third week in a row, we are observing a weekly decrease in the number of coronavirus cases and hospitalizations. According to quarantine indicators, Luhansk and Lviv regions are leaving the level of epidemiological danger. Therefore, this week we will initiate a meeting of the State Commission on Technogenic and Environmental Safety and Emergency Situations.
The date that has twice changed the course of Ukraine's history. On November 22nd in 2004, the Orange Revolution began 9 years later. With a difference of 1 day, the then Prime Minister Azarov suspends preparation for signing the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement. And again, thousands of Ukrainians came to the Maidan, Independence Square, in the center of Kyiv. There were violent dispersals of the protesters, brutal beating of students by the security forces, shooting of people, and flight of President Yanukovych to Russia. My colleagues went to the spot to see where it all started and how people marked the day.
Национальные флаги, цветы и свечи.
National flags, flowers and candles. In the center of Kyiv, hundreds of Ukrainians commemorated those killed during the clashes in winter of 2014. The protests which led to them began 8 years ago in November of 2013 as a reaction to the decision of the Cabinet of Ministers to suspend preparation for signing of an association agreement between Ukraine and the European Union.
I come here almost every year, and in 2014, 2013, I was here too. That's why I'm here now.
Це біль, це розпач, це відчай.
This is pain, this is despair. At the time watching this on TV and realizing that I can't help anyone in any way, my heart was just bleeding.
Мені важливо зараз відчуття.
It is important to remember everyone who was there and remember that while there is a conflict with Russia, while we still have a hot spot in the east, we should stay together, stay united.
Ukrainians have been carrying candles and icon lamps to the alley of heroes of the Heavenly Hundred since early morning.
Тоді я працювала в університеті Гринченка.
I used to work at the Grinченko University, and by the way, the university was one of the first to come out with the slogan, "We're not afraid." Students participated in those events as they went to the Maidan at that time.
Anastasia came here to honor the memory of her father, who was among those killed during the clashes between protesters and security forces in February of 2014.
Коли в нього запитувала, він часто відповідав, що
When asked, my father often answered that he stood for my future, for my independence. I was only 10, and I did not fully understand what was all this for and where we are going. But now I can say that those sacrifices were not in vain, and we have a future now.
Цей от момент захопленням Криму, захопленням східних.
The moment of seizure of Crimea, of the eastern territories, it was being prepared by Russia, and I'm convinced that we have managed to interrupt those plans and prevented them from coming true. There was no time for preparation, and Russia was forced to start with unprepared actions.
The top officials of the state have also come to honor the memory of the victims. President Volodymyr Zelensky has also recorded a video message to all Ukrainians in which he recalled the price that had to be paid for freedom.
Ми вільні творити майбутнє.
We are free to create the future, and we should be proud of it. We have paid and we continue to pay a very high price for freedom, and we will never forget everyone who gave their lives for Ukraine, and we will never forgive everyone who took their lives and wanted to deprive us of our freedom.
Reported by Vadim Kramer, Valeria Nikipelova and Svetlana Sich, UATV News.
A new passenger train by the Kryukivsky car building plant connected Odesa with the city of Izmail. The Danube Express passes a distance of almost 300 kilometers in 4 hours and 40 minutes. Such a trip will cost 189 hryvnias, that is some $10. 3 comfortable carriages can take 170 passengers. Each seat is equipped with individual sockets and USB slots. The train was also equipped with a modern air conditioning system. Thanks to the new composition, the officials plan to increase the tourist flow to the southern districts of the Odesa region.
Стратегічно дуже важливо.
It is very important to give a new impetus to the development of the Ukrainian Danube region, and it was decided to call the train the Danube Express. We have already signed a memorandum on tariff policy between the Odessa city government, Ukrzaliznytsia State Railroads Management Company, and the Odessa Regional State Administration.
Checkmate! The Ukrainian men's national chess team won the European Championship in Slovenia, the 7th round, in which our team met the rating favorite Russian national team, was decisive. Ukrainians showed their advantage in a duel with the national team of Azerbaijan. The second place in the European Championship was taken by French chess players. The third place went to Poland. That's all for today. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Stay healthy and take care of yourself.